Western meddling has now gone past Western countries and it has now trickled down to international organizations like the United Nations. Maybe it existed and we never knew about it, but now, thanks to leaked documents, we know that the Deputy Secretary General of the United States, Ambassador Amina Jane Mohammed, sent letters and emails to his boss, Antonio Guterres, saying that she does not trust the Kenyan leader, William Ruto, and she doesn't find him trustworthy, but rather a very brutal person that cannot be trusted. If this is not meddling of the highest order, I don't know what is. Hi guys, how are you doing? Thank you so much for making time to catch up with one of our chat videos. My name is Zindiro Ganga. I am a business journalist by profession, but I'm also a digital content creator, and I make content on diaspora relocation back to the continent. So if that is something you're interested in, head over to my channel at Ndiro Oganga. I am also on social media. You can connect with me at Ndiro Oganga. Now, this week, or rather depending on the time that you'll be watching this video, news came out that certain classified documents had been leaked on the internet, and part of that leak was some of the information that was traded between the UN Deputy Secretary General and the UN Secretary General. Now, Kenya recently went to the election. Last year, August, we went to our elections to elect the president and other leaders in the country, including governors, senators, members of parliament, and different representatives. And it was a hotly contested election. The former president, His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta, had preferred to vouch for the former opposition leader or the opposition leader, Raila Amolo Odinga, as opposed to backing his deputy of the time, William Ruto. And this brought forth a very spirited campaign where it was dynasties against non-dynasties. So for those who don't know, the Kenyan president, Uhuru Kenyatta, is the son of the founding president of the country, Mzee Jomo Kenyatta, and Raila Odinga, who was the opposition leader being backed by Uhuru Kenyatta, is the son of one of the freedom fighters of Kenya and a former vice president, Jaramogi Odinga. So the Ruto administration, who was the vice president to Uhuru Kenyatta, ran a campaign saying it's time that Kenya is liberated from dynasties, meaning that people whose fathers had been in power and passed over the leadership baton to them does not make them good leaders, and they shouldn't continue being in office, and it's time we try different leadership. People who came up from nowhere and nothing and have become reputable or have grown into leaders, depending on how you perceive reputable to be. Now, after a very spirited campaign season, William Ruto emerged as the winner of the election, and he was sworn in, and he's been in office for technically 6 months now. The issue becomes that if you look at everything that's happening with the international community, it's more like they were favoring one candidate over the other, and international meddling into Kenyan politics is nothing new. Every time Kenya goes to election, the international community almost tries to have a say in who we will put in office. This is always done indirectly, obviously not directly, by saying shady things like choices have consequences. But we've also seen that immediately Kenya puts somebody in office, the international community quickly adapts around them and starts doing business with them, and it's all good in La La Land. For example, in 2013, when we put Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto into office, they had cases at the International Criminal Court that they had to answer. And the Western world kept saying, choices have consequences, choices have consequences. And when they won the election, we saw the Western world working with them. So we've never seen meddling beyond just trying to influence the results of the election through lip service. So that's at least what we know publicly. But now we are seeing that the meddling is going beyond the countries and into international organizations. In the leaked memo, the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations sends messages to the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, saying she perceives and considers Kenya's President William Ruto as ruthless and untrustworthy. This can come from probably the cases that he had to answer at the ICC, because he was accused of some of the atrocious acts that happened against some of the civilians. People were killed, people were maimed, people were burned alive. families were separated, land was grabbed, and the cases were at ICC. One way or the other, the cases were dismissed. It doesn't prove innocence, neither does it prove guilt, but the cases were dismissed, right? But it looks like people have not forgotten that part of history. And I also think that the untrustworthy part is because, one, Ruto is a politician, and two, he has adopted this persona of being a godly man, and everything about him surrounds spirituality and God and the church. But then again, when has politics and religion ever mixed, right? And he says one thing and does the other. For example, the Kenyan government is broke, but they're spending 800 million on buying cars. So there's just so much double standard, and that is just what we see on the surface level. We don't know what she saw. We don't know what she's had behind closed doors to be able to make such an assumption. But when such information is shared at such high and international bodies such as the UN, it influences how the UN perceives countries like Kenya. It influences how the UN will speak about Kenya to some of the leading countries, for example, the G7 countries. It influences the perception of the leader. And let's not get it twisted. In as much as African leaders might not be the best, taking out an African leader or perceiving an African leader a certain way or going against the leader will create some form of instability in the country. Kenya, for example, every time we're approaching our election cycle, yes, in 2007 and 2008, we learned our lesson on the impact of civil unrest in the country, but political temperatures are always very high. It's very charged, and it's a good thing because it inspires a spirit of democracy and speaking for yourself and championing for your rights and putting politicians to work. But it's not good for business. The whole year that Kenya goes into election, business slows down because everybody's just like, let's wait and see what happens here. So saying such things about a leader of a sovereign country who was democratically elected and put in office makes you want to raise an eyebrow. What are you up to? What's the end game? Why did you send such a message? And to the Secretary General of the United Nations. However, on the flip side, the US ambassador to Kenya sent an email to Biden, and she had positive things to say about William Ruto. She said he's easy to work with. He's very visionary. He has the way he perceives matters and economics and is working towards Vision 2030, she was sort of impressed with him as a leader. Well, is it true or false? Kenyans will tell you that the economy is not doing very well, and the international community and the West will always choose to see what they want to see. Their truth is not necessarily our truth, but we cannot turn a blind eye to the fact that one of the most powerful organizations on the continent did not have kind things to say about a leader of an African country. And this just goes, like, I'm just thinking about this now. Then how much more have they said about him in emails that we've not seen? Then forget him. What do they say about African leaders? How do they perceive African leaders? If you call Ruto untrustworthy and ruthless, what will you say about certain African leaders who are leading countries that are having like civil unrest and their economies in what are you saying about them? Then what kind of impact does this have? If the UN perceives you in a certain way, what is the trickle-down effect, How does that affect donor funding coming into your country? How does that affect then your budgets, your education budget, your health budget, your development budget, infrastructural budget? How does that affect trade, volumes of trade? Because nobody wants to trade with a leader who's been dubbed ruthless and untrustworthy. Am I reaching? Or is there something here? Anyway, mine is just to report it as it happened. And I have told you that the United Nations Deputy Secretary General says she finds the President of Kenya ruthless and untrustworthy. And I'm looking forward to the day when that will be said also about Western leaders that have started wars in Middle East and continue to fund wars in Africa so that they can continue to benefit on the natural resources that are available in Africa without having to pay for the actual price, but instead just bringing guns and bribing a few people. I said what I said. I'll see you again next time.